So tonight's conversation with three distinguished guests who I will introduce to you in a moment. But first, speaking of testing the limits, we're also testing the limits through COVID of organizations just like FOLCS. We saw this as a public service to not scale back, but in fact to ramp up. And we've been providing even more programming than we normally do for the reasons that we do, because smart and entertaining conversations are more important now than ever, that people are staying at home and really relying on these kinds of services to not just be entertained, but to understand the world in which we live. I know this is a difficult time for everybody, but if you're in a charitable mood, we're a nonprofit, we can certainly use your help. Giving Tuesday, a global initiative, is taking place on Tuesday. We're participating on that. But if you can help out in any way, we'd appreciate it. You can always donate to us at folks.org/donate, and I hope that you will. But either way, whether you do or not, we'll still be back here because we've got a lot of other programming, which I'll announce soon. Before we introduce our guests, I want to just give you two little technical things. If you want to leave comments throughout tonight's conversation, go to the chat button. It's probably either to the right or to the bottom right. Click on it. It's a talk bubble, and then you can provide comments throughout the evening. And if you want to leave questions that we'll hopefully be able to get through to the end, there's a Q&A button. I think that's on the bottom of your screen. Click on that, and you can leave questions all throughout. All right, so for tonight's conversation, testing the limits of universities nationwide in the time of COVID-19. We have three special guests, all from different universities, all in different capacities. And let me, before introducing them, say that they're not actually speaking on behalf of their universities. They are longtime educators and administrators, but they're really speaking on their own behalf alone. First, let me introduce you. They'll be waving to you. Patricia Salkin. Patty will be coming up in a second. Is she up yet? There's Patty waving to everyone. Patty is the provost of Touro College, where FOLCS and I am based. And she's a former law dean as well. And so that's Patty Salkin. Debora Spar is coming up soon. There's Debora waving to us. Debora is a senior associate dean for online education at the Harvard Business School. And she's the former president of Barnard College. And our last distinguished guest is Bill Treanor. Where's Bill? There's Bill. He's excellent at waving, by the way. Bill is very special to us. He's the dean at Georgetown Law School. He's formerly the dean at Fordham Law School. It's important to know that FOLCS was built, it began at Fordham when Bill was the dean, and we are very grateful to him. He is the originator. This was his vision. He was the one who gave me the mandate to conduct FOLCS and to build it. It's 15 years old. And so we always love having him back, but we're also it's very important to acknowledge him. So thank you all for being our guests. Let's get straight into it. First, let's take a look at a picture. This is a photo from Harvard, where Debora's at. Shervin, let's show the audience this photo. Shervin, oh, there it is. Can everyone see that? Is that, yeah, there it is. That's Harvard Yard. I think that's John Harvard's statue, isn't that right? That's a statue of John Harvard, and there's a solo runner there. That's a very desolate, creepy scene at probably the most famous undergraduate school on the planet, and there's just a solo, solitary runner there. I don't want to get morbid or moribund about this, but is this the end of campus learning? How serious should we take this? What we're seeing now, are we headed in this direction? Maybe we're headed into it before. Two of you, both Patty and Debora, have already been engaged in online education. But is this in some ways a shock to the system that introduces the end of campus learning as we know it? Anyone want to jump right in?
So I'll start. I was in Harvard Yard recently, walking around, and I wouldn't say so much it's creepy, it's sad. You know, these are places that have been around for hundreds of years, that were built to contain young people and to foster young people's learning and their education and their socializing. So it's deeply, deeply sad to see these places without their kids, without their students. And it's a horrible moment for higher education, as it is for pretty much every sector in the world right now. But campus won't stay like that for forever. And I'm sure every school around the country and around the world is doing whatever it can right now to try and figure out how best to get the students and the faculty and the staff back as quickly but critically as safely as possible. And it's hard. We're seeing the same issues, and whether it's in the subways or in the performing arts or in sports, restaurants, everywhere. But we'll get there. We're not going to get there easily. And for sure, I believe that this is a massive inflection point for American higher education. But the kids will get back, and that yard will be full again. It may be full of people engaging in social distancing. It better be. But I do not believe this is the end of higher education. It just may be the start of a very different era.
That's an interesting point, what Debora just said. She didn't drop the term of art, social distancing. Are we prepared for the possibility that campuses will reopen in the fall, but under very, very different circumstances?
I think that's something that we're all looking at. So this is all moving so quickly that nobody has the answer. Nobody knows really what it's going to look like in August. But I think a lot of schools are looking at some kind of hybrid model. So I could imagine, for example, at Georgetown Law, we were thinking, Mondays and Wednesdays, the students whose last names start from A to M are in class, and then N through Z, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then they alternate on Friday. And each of the classes combines an online and a physical presence reality. So there are a lot of variations, but I think what we're all trying to figure out is, how can we move forward? How can we have a physical presence, but how can we keep people safe? So the social distancing is a key part of that.
And so I just want to back up, and I agree with everything that Debora and Bill said, but I think that what's most important is that the education continues, whether it's the physical presence of the campus or not. And I think that that's the most important thing, is keeping people, our students and our faculty, engaged on the new modalities of teaching and learning. And so, and I agree, it's going to be slow to get everybody back. And Bill, to your point, I'm going to take that one step further and say we've been talking about that as well. But I think another aspect is, in an urban setting like Touro, we have a lot of students that rely on the subway and the buses to get to school, the same thing as the faculty members. It's not where they can get in cars and drive. So they may not want to use public transportation. So even on the days when they can come, we're prepared for the reality that A, they might not want to come, B, they, from a health standpoint, may have underlying health issues or live with people who do, and they may not want to be there. And on the other hand, we also know that we have students who will say, if we could be in the classroom, we'd rather be there than virtually. And so I really think that higher education is going to have to offer both options for the fall, to the extent that the government allows us to use social distancing mechanisms and so forth to reopen the campuses.
Go ahead, Bill. No, Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think, and it's also the faculty, the faculty members, there's going to be a range. Some people are looking forward to being in the class, and some people are going to feel uncomfortable. So when you come up with the model that we have for the fall, it's got to have, that both of those options have to be available.
So what happens, Bill, when a faculty member says, I don't want to come in? Can we make a faculty member come in, or is it an accommodation if they have a legitimate underlying health issue or an age issue that's been identified is on the categories of people that need to be careful? And how do you represent to the students that they could come in if their professor's not coming in?
Well, so I think you have to create a situation in which people who don't feel comfortable coming in don't come in. So, I would envision that these classes will be both online and that there will be people in the classroom. Again, I think, one of the things that I think overall that this starts us to focus on is, what can you do in terms of the education, but also the networking is really crucial. So students, having contact with students is also really crucial. So how do we make that possible, in the setting of this pandemic?
So a moment ago, Patty talked about the she used word modality, within these new modalities. Let's talk a little about what that means. For instance, are these modalities working? Would we say that overall, let's say you were at 3 different schools, but you're also, and I'll ask you later about your communications with other deans and presidents and provosts, would you say that we have been, the higher education model in the United States has shown great resilience and agility in adapting quickly? And if they did, how did it work? I mean, for instance, some of the schools shut down sooner than businesses, right? They seem to get, the message about COVID-19 faster. How have we done it? Do we have a report card on higher education? And what would we grade them?
Well, I don't want to sound Pollyanna-ish about it, but I think if you had asked any of us, certainly if you had asked me 4 months ago, if all of higher education, along with all of K-12, could go online in a matter of 2 weeks, I would have laughed. I mean, it seems completely impossible. I'd never used Zoom in my life. And yet, we've all kind of done it. And it's certainly, it's at least at a place, in a residential campus, it's not the same. I mean, you're missing so much of the normal experience, but it's kind of amazing that, we figured it out. What is it? Nothing concentrates the mind like the prospect of a hanging. We got at Harvard Business School, 1,800 MBAs online in a week. And I think we're learning. I think, the older ones among us have figured out how to use these technologies. The younger ones are innovating. And, is it perfect? Absolutely not. Do we want to live like this forever? No. But I think we need to give ourselves, some brownie points for not just shutting down and for just maintaining that level of commitment to somehow educate these folks as best we can under these, totally unprecedented circumstances.
I mean, at Georgetown, we had 2,700 students. It was amazing. It went online right away. And one thing that as we're looking at the lessons of this that I think is really very powerful is, the education works. I teach a seminar every Monday, and so I have 20 students. And I have to say, in a lot of ways, it's better than the actual being in the classroom, because you can see Brady Bunch like all 20 faces on the screen, right? And you can read them. It's like they're getting this, or they're not getting this, or this is making them mad, right? And you just don't have, when you're in a normal seminar room, you can see like 4 faces across a room. Now they're all 6 inches in front of you. And in a lot of ways, that's very powerful.
Do you think it actually focuses their attention more? It puts them on the spot they're not on Facebook. They're definitely with Dean Treanor that day for that.
Right. I mean, they know that you're looking at them, and I think that actually increases the level of attention. It's really striking.
I think it depends a lot on the format of the class. So Zoom was not made for this, right? Zoom was made for meetings when you have 12 people in a room. I have 93 students in my class right now. So, they're teeny tiny. I can't see them all at once. But as, I have no idea if this is true, but I must imagine that Zoom is, spending, its energy right now to come up with a Zoom for classroom. And we're figuring it out. And I think, to Bill's point, I did a guest lecture in a class last week, and I didn't know these kids, but I felt like I knew them better in the Zoom format than I ever have when I just walk into a physical classroom, because there is that immediacy. So I think this crisis moment has forced us to sort of think really hard about stuff that we kind of knew was out there anyhow. What works online, what doesn't work online, and how do we start redoing the technologies and the platforms so that we can take the stuff that right now doesn't work so well and try and figure out how to make it better.
Well, given what you and Bill just said, it makes me think that seminars do better than large classrooms.
Well,
And it sounds like perhaps online teachers, just teacher communications for office hours might work well here too, right? Patty,
If the big class is a lecture, it works fine online. Big interactive classes are harder, but even there, I mean, we do that. We're doing this already at Harvard Business School online, which was, born online. To Patty's point, we use lots of breakout groups, lots of chat function, lots of sort of out of classroom activity. So we have the sort of the beginnings of these functions for even social interaction. We have to figure them out faster now.
Patty, did you have something? Because I was going to, go ahead.
Yeah, I did want to, I wanted to point out, something we had talked about earlier that Debora mentioned, which is you can use Zoom for small working groups and other things that are not always as effective in the classroom. But I think we're also missing a point here. When we had to pivot quickly in March, there are a lot of students and faculty that don't have the same levels of technology available to them. Forget about the skills for a minute, but you have people that don't all have laptops with cameras, that don't all have smartphones. People that don't have a lot of the same bandwidth for internet in their homes. And then when the whole world seemed to go, at least in the Northeast for all of us, online, for those that had two-family households, that people were both working remotely, two-parent households, and kids in school, whether it's college or elementary school, every household, everybody doesn't have their own device, and also the bandwidth doesn't work for all of that. And so I think that we've been doing the best that we can, but depending upon the student population that we serve and what people have access to, that's been a whole understory for this as well.
Right, and that's one of the challenges that we're facing is, first of all, the access varies. And, when we're planning for the fall, that's something where we have to think about, how do we make sure, that people have the kind of access that, we've not always been able to have when you kind of move in a crisis situation. And, and then the other thing that, we're also very mindful of is, this is a time of tragic loss, and so many of our students, they're under strain because they have a parent who has lost a job, or, they're sick, or they have a partner who's sick. So, I mean, I think, apart from kind of whether the pedagogy is a success, I mean, I think Patty is right to focus on the access issues. And then also, this is a time of profound trauma, and that affects our students so profoundly.
But you already have, I suspect, dean of students, right? I remember, yeah. So, given what Bill and Patty just said, do we have anecdotal information or actual information from yourselves that we're spending a lot more time counseling students than we ever had to before? For all sorts of reasons, they're coming to us with problems that are clearly COVID-19 related.
I mean, our counselors are just so busy, whether they're the academic or the career or the mental health counselors, because of the challenges that people are facing. The other thing, though, that I see that's really, very impressive is the way the faculty is stepping up, having office hours, having meetings with students, because that's, first of all, that's something that they don't have, in the physical world in the same way. And they're just very conscious that now is the time to do that.
Right, and I think that we've been using staff at the various schools that may not be able to do a lot of their routine work remotely. They're on the phone calling the students from their programs and checking in with the students, every week, every couple of weeks to see how they're doing. And anecdotally, in addition to on one end of the spectrum where you have students that are now in a busy household and they can't find the quiet space to study, let alone the quiet time to get onto their Zoom for class, we also have students that are feeling a lot of isolation because they sheltered in place and they live alone. And everything in between, but that just becomes the stark reality. And just lastly, you asked about the counselors and the kinds of issues that the students are coming forward with. There's a lot of hunger issues, a lot of people without food. They lost their jobs, their parents lost their jobs, their spouses or partners lost their jobs. And so until we get the money flowing back to everybody, and until things come to a better sense of normalcy in the grocery stores. And it really depends where you are. If you're in a more dense urban area, or if you're in a less dense suburban or rural area, as to the extent of stress that you're feeling.
And
Well,
I'll just
clearly,
add- oh, I was just going to add one other group of sort of students who we've seen undergoing a lot of stress is international students.
Mm.
So the American higher ed has gotten so used to being so global and international, which has been wonderful over the past 20 years. But now we have incoming students, I'm sure you all do as well, who are terrified they won't be able to get visas for next year. We have current students who either can't get home or went home, and now they're doing classes at 3 a.m. and struggling with the issues in their home country. So that's just added another whole uncertainty, both institutionally and personally, into the mix.
Right,
So
and that's such a,
Financial aid, the emergency aid support for the students, the foreign students, are not eligible for it.
right. No, and that's such an important point, because our foreign students are the ones who are facing in a lot of ways just amazing challenges. They're trying to get back home, they can't get home. So our dorm, the reason why we have our dorm is open is because of the international students who can't get back to China or India, and then providing support for them. And then they're also facing incredible financial challenges. As you say, they're not eligible for the the aid packages that the government is offering.
So given what you've all just said, what we've learned, Pat, Deborah said, look, if you would have told me that within 2 weeks we could have gotten going, what we're learning is that this was a very steep learning curve, but everybody ramped up very quickly and got better at it than anyone could have imagined. One question I have is, what we're doing now, this is so fascinating. I think the audience is just, wow, if you're interested in higher education, everyone has learned something they hadn't thought about before. Did you have access to colleagues? Were there communities of law deans, business school deans, university presidents, provosts? Did the university community rally together and say, this is what I just learned this week? Because everything you've just described, no one could have planned for, no one expected. I mean, I'd never heard the words, what Patty said before about bandwidth. This becomes now an issue, right? Does a house have enough internet access for 3 kids to go to school, in high school, junior high school, and in college? So the question is, these are all new discoveries. This looks like it needed a Manhattan Project in order to get done. Did you have help, or did you come to all of this by yourselves?
I think for the provost, there's been a lot of sharing. There's an association of chief academic officers, and we did a webinar, I think the week of March 13th, 14th, and just started coming up with the checklist of all the issues that all of us were working on, and that's been an active site. ACE has been doing webinars. The Chronicle of Higher Education, Inside Higher Ed, in addition to their daily newsletters, they're doing webinars. I mean, it's almost overload on all of the information sharing that is available right now, which has really been terrific. But it just goes to show that higher ed can be resilient, and we can be leaders and problem solvers and critical thinkers. And that's exactly what we're teaching our students.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And it is, I mean, this is a classic example of building a plane while you're flying, right? So, we're confronting all of these difficult issues. And so, the conversations are occurring at every level. So I'm amazed. Our faculty meetings are better attended than ever. And it's amazing. I mean, I had a faculty meeting last week with 106 people, which we never get. But I think everybody, has views, and they want to be heard, and they want to contribute. And then what Patty said, I'm very similar. I have a group of deans who I meet with regularly, and we talk about, how do you handle this challenge? What are you thinking about for the fall? Because it's a new world for all of us.
So in this new world, did you have to make adjustments, sacrifices in the rigor of scholarship? Were there new ways to complete courses that would have never been imagined before? Did we have to relax standards? Given what you've described, so many students reaching out for counseling, for help, everyone in a panic mode. It does have the, you know, the end of the world feel to it. Does anything really matter? I was thinking about how, you know, New Yorkers know that we have, in New York, we have, you know, pre-war buildings and post-war buildings. And then we have post 9/11 and pre 9/11. In San Francisco, it's pre-fire, post-fire. Clearly, this is going to have the same metaphoric association. Post-COVID-19 experiences. Did we have to make adjustments that we would not normally do? Can you share any of that? Because so many things had to be done differently.
I think one of the biggest
Same number of exams, same
one of
number
the
of
biggest
papers due,
adjustments-
everything.
Exams were a big adjustment because there are lots of different options for remotely proctored exams versus at the other end of the extreme, just giving an open notes exam or giving a paper or small group projects where people could work themselves in a Zoom chat room or over the phone on something. And so faculty did have to rethink their assessments and what truly could only be high stakes versus what we thought could only be high stakes, but now could be done some way else to assess the student learning, because there's also a significant cost with the remote proctoring. So I think that all of the schools and all the programs had to do a little bit of their own self-reflection to figure out how they could assess student learning, how to deliver labs. You know, you can't be in the lab to do a science experiment, a biochemistry or so forth. How to make that happen? For us at Touro, we have a large health sciences program. Well, the hospitals and the clinics were no longer taking our student doctors, our nurses, our physician's assistants, you know, our mental health counselors, because they were no longer considered essential personnel because they didn't have enough PPE for them to guarantee their safety. And so I spent a lot of time with dozens of specialized accreditors and our state accrediting body trying to come up with appropriate alternatives and simulations. And for most of our programs, we were able to find solutions, but the solutions, again, have to be agreed to by all of the accreditors in addition to the faculty in the programs.
Right. So, I mean, one of our biggest challenges was the grading, as Patty said.
Exactly.
We, and I think most law schools moved towards mandatory pass-fail. So the idea was, you know, people are in such unequal environments that you couldn't even have what we'd originally thought we would have, which is, you know, you get your grade and then you decide if you want your grade or if you would take a pass. But that would, you know, that would help students who are better situated to do well. So and again, most law schools moved to mandatory pass-fail. I mean, I think, you know, the other challenges, I mean, labs are difficult. I mean, we don't have labs. We do have clinics. So, you know, so one of the questions that we worked hard on, how do you do a clinic? So we've done a lot remote, and I think that's a model that works. And, you know, a lot of people who were in jail for misdemeanors, you know, our students worked remotely to get them out because of the health risk. So it was amazing what we were able to do, even in things that are not, you didn't think would be able to work in a virtual environment.
So you're saying that what doctors are learning about telemedicine might work for telelaw, that you can imagine situations where client meetings for, say, for law school, or, you know, the experience that we're seeing, you know, people are literally saying, you know, I had a meeting with my doctor the other day, and it actually was a real visit. I actually felt like I was with my doctor. And I'm wondering whether that you can imagine that other disciplines would end up with the same experience, where some of this can go remote, some of it can go digital.
I mean, a lot of the court cases are now remote, and, you know, I can imagine that they would stay remote.
I'll give you just two little anecdotes, both of which are lighthearted, but one of the moments I was most impressed by was our student performances at the end of the year. You know, there's always
Yes.
a musical and a concert. Our kids put the musical online virtually, and they did the a cappella concert online with everybody, you know, recording live in their bedrooms and harmonizing. And it was kind of amazing. And they, you know, reported afterwards that it was actually a more intimate experience. So they're sort of figuring it out. And then I asked my class the last day, I said, you know, I've been kind of shocked because the quality of your presentations in some ways has been better. Like, is the technology helping? And one guy sort of sheepishly acknowledged, he said, yeah, we have nothing else to do anymore. So there may be some advantage to their social lives having been destroyed.
I'm wondering, we started off this conversation, and I think people were, I would think the audience, I was surprised to hear about, these alternating dates, like, Debora assured us, we will come back to campus. Campus will exist. But then we, said, well, but it might look different. It's a different kind of a campus. I'm wondering that given the anecdote that we're hearing about even, the way the production of the play, that, students have always been told that the large part of going away to college or going to law school, graduate school is going away, right? That's the whole point. That was why, you don't want to go to a commuter school. You want to go away. And this is forcing us to think or rethink about the social development, the socialization, the formative years that are being developed. Are we going to see a suppression? We already have become a digitized people, staring into our screens already too much, right? People were already complaining, spending too much time on Facebook, spending too much time in front of, your computers. And now we've turned school and even possibly socialization into it. I'm wondering that what are the potential long-term consequences? None of you are social psychologists, but you're educators, and I wonder whether anyone, it's maybe too soon to think about. What are the long-term impacts of what we might lose simply by even what Debora said, losing the size of the campus on alternating dates, having people literally walking away from each other 6 feet apart. It's a profound existential question, but I'm wondering whether it's too early to think about it.
I mean, I think that's the biggest loss that what we're seeing. I actually don't, there's a loss in terms of the academics, but there are also advantages. But I think the biggest loss that we're seeing is the students with students being together. So, I think, what Debora was talking about is really amazing, the singing together.
Yeah.
But just kind of being around each other 24/7. So, what we're grappling with now is, particularly at the undergraduate level, most forcefully, it's this being away from home that is just, that is such an important part of growth, being on your own, being responsible, that they don't have. But we're also grappling with the fact that, the undergraduate dorm is a petri dish. It's the biggest risk that we're looking at.
You're saying, so this is something everybody's thinking about, like, how do you actually get people to go with, 3 more roommates, right? As Bill just said, the dorm life itself is a petri dish. And if everybody's been conditioned that everyone is asymptomatic, Dr. Fauci has told us the fall's going to be worse, right? And all of a sudden we're now, stuck in a building, with a bunch of roommates in small dorm life, and then all eating in large cafeterias all together. How do we get past that? How do we deal with that? And what are the consequences of not having that experience? Because we all did have that experience, and we would want to hope that every future student would. And I'm wondering whether it's too soon to think about that might happen, what the consequences, what are the ways to redress it, to soften the blow? Is it too soon? Is anybody thinking about this?
Thane, I think you have to go with the evolution and the change in time. So I think our K through 12 education was much different than the K through 12 education that our college students are experienced. And, even my kids are both in their mid-20s. And when they were in elementary school, middle school, high school, I'd say, call your friend. We don't call anybody, we text. Their modes of communication were already different. They were digital natives way before the faculty and everybody else has now been catching up. So, I'm not sure, I haven't seen a longitudinal study to see if they are any more or less socialized, and it's just how they do it is different than how we did it. I don't know if one is better than the other. I think that we just have to keep remembering the core reasons for higher education and the skills that we try to impart to the students. And, so they may not all be away from home right now. Because even coming back, even if the dorms could reopen, there's not going to be 4 people in a room because, as you say, for the fall, to me, it just seems an impossibility.
Mhm. Deborah, I'm going to use a word that is often used in business schools. That's why I want to talk to you. The word disruption, the change of business models, and that we should sometimes welcome it. Is it fair, unfair, grotesque to think of COVID-19 as a disruption in the business model of school? Or is it just, we would call it not a disruption, but an absolute aberration, an act of God that no one could have forecasted, but that I'm wondering whether, people who think in terms of business models would say, I just listened to, 3 distinguished educators, the 3 of you, and you've pointed out a number of benefits, a number of success stories that have arisen out of this that would not have happened had this not taken place.
I think what we're seeing now is both a disruption and an aberration and a crisis and a tragedy all mushed together. My late great colleague, Clayton Christensen, who sort of was first coined the term disruptive innovation, has been talking about disruption in the higher education sector for at least 15 years now. And I think this disruption, for both better and worse, and it is both better and worse, has been long underway. We are seeing not only the move to online digital education that we've just been talking about, but we're seeing the immense financial pressures that schools across the country are wrangling with right now, and the immense financial pressures that students across the country have been wrangling with for over a decade. This current pandemic is going to accelerate those trends and that crisis. Many schools will not survive it. Many students will have their own education and their own lives severely disrupted. I think my biggest fear is that we're going to see an acceleration in the bifurcation of higher education. So we have a phenomenally good education for the elite and at the top tier and for those who can pay, and far inferior education for many others. So these things are going to happen. There will be good things that happen as a result, and there will be horrible things that happen as a result. And it's all going to happen faster now.
Shervin, let's take a look at this second photo, and then we can have our guests weigh in. Shervin, you with me? Oh, there it is. Is it up? Can we all see it? I see it on the right, Shervin, but I don't know if it's enlarged for everybody yet. There it is. So this is a photo from the University of Chicago. You can see their cars with signs on it, and there's a student or young faculty, perhaps. They're all wearing masks, and they're all protesting. And this introduces the idea that Debora just gave us. Universities are now under great financial stress and pressure. Students are seeking refunds for educational services that were unused, not necessary, given what happened for the second half of this semester. Debora used the word, some schools may not survive. I mean, that's a very scary thought. Tuition-driven schools, which many are. University endowments. I mean, I wonder whether any of you can speak to that. Is this something that we're hearing from donors, from trustees, that everyone's concerned about the services that we would normally provide, given the fact that the stock market has taken a huge hit, and the fact that there may be fewer students, and if there are fewer students, there's less tuition?
So, I mean, this is a challenge, I think for any kind of school. The exact nature of the challenge varies from school to school, but for everybody's a challenge. Hopkins, which is immensely wealthy, was one of the first schools to, say that they're going to have to take drastic steps. And it's because so much of their income is dependent on their hospital. There are other schools where the endowment is key, but the endowment is down. And then, for the other schools, it's tuition revenues. But, to go back to, think about the fall. So when you operated in the fall, think about a college where you normally have 5,000 students, but you can only put 1,000 in the dorm. How do you survive that? And I think, from the position of an educator, I mean, I both understand the push that we saw at the University of Chicago for a tuition freeze. But, from our perspective, most of our, virtually all of our costs still stay the same. We don't let faculty members go. And then, in fact, the demands for counseling are up. Georgetown Law has a program of supporting students during the summer in public interest jobs. That's going to go up. We're increasing financial aid. So, all of these things are really going to be hits financially, that push us in a challenging way that's really unprecedented. Now, I mean, one question that I think we're all grappling with is this a 1 or 2 year phenomenon, or is this more existential? I mean, I think it's probably more of a 1 or 2 year phenomenon, but again, it's a shock to the system that nobody has seen.
You're saying if it's a 1 or 2 year phenomenon, from what Debora said, that doesn't mean that the small school that is in financial trouble could weather 2 years, right? It's easy to say it's only 2 years, but for some institutions, that may not be, they might not be able to recover. Is that what you're suggesting? I know, Debora, you mentioned this earlier. There was a story in the Wall Street Journal today about this very point, about what's happening in terms of, can you give us some of the hard numbers?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm sorry, I don't have all the numbers with me, but if you look over the past 10 years, we've been seeing schools closing or merging pretty consistently now. Those numbers will almost certainly go up. One of the educational organizations is predicting a 15% decline in enrollment next fall and a $45 billion decline in tuition revenues. So those are really big numbers. And that the article you referenced, they had this, very eloquent but scary quote from an administrator, I think it was at Northeastern, and he said the world order has changed. When we build models, we don't have a variable called virus. Which is, I think, a very powerful statement. We've been building models to deal with a lot of these other financial and demographic pressures, let's not forget as well. But now you throw the virus into there and it's just kind of blown everything out of the water.
Right. Well, that's absolutely, this is kind of a black swan event. You just don't build your models on the basis of, no students in the dorms, everybody being online. It's not something that, you think about as at all, even a remote possibility, and so, if a school has resources, it can draw down on them for a couple of years, but a lot of schools are so totally tuition dependent that they're not going to be around.
So I wonder whether one thought is that some students don't come back for all sorts of reasons. They don't want to leave home. They don't want to expose themselves to a large campus environment. They've got all kinds of medical issues. They're concerned about their families at home. There's financial issues that they can't deal with, and universities' tuition is still what the tuition is, as Bill said. I'm wondering whether that means that junior colleges may end up benefiting, commuter schools may end up benefiting, that the fact that the students don't come back to one school doesn't mean that they're not willing to go to a different school. That doesn't mean that it's okay for the school that just lost 15% of its students and 50% of its tuition. I'm just wondering, we may end up still educating them. We're just educating them in a different location for 2 years, as we're saying. Bill's saying he thinks it's arguably maybe a short-term phenomenon, one that would be, drastic and catastrophic for some places, but, survivable, even in terms of some students just, transferring to a different school, a state school, until the world heals.
I still think it's important for all of us to continue the conversation about the value proposition of higher education, because remember, it's not just the economics of what's happening in higher ed, it's the economics of the world. And if these students that are traditionally spending 4 years or more in higher education are not, what are they going to do? The employment rate is through the roof right now. The unemployment rate is through the roof right now. And so, that we have to figure out how to right size expectations, how to provide options, not just in the community colleges. I agree that that's going to be a big option for new high school graduates, but we have to figure out, we're all from schools that have undergraduate and graduate programs. How do we make them more accessible? Is it going to be a traditional semester? Are we going to go to trimesters? Are we going to go to block classes? Are we going to change the pricing? Not so much in terms of what the ultimate tuition might be at the end, but maybe it's a little bit more of a pay-as-you-go, and maybe people are going to go a little slower. I mean, there's a million ideas and models out there that people are looking at.
I'm wondering, how do you sell your school? How do you sell your university in the age of the coronavirus? You know, normally you show pictures of campus life and very happy co-eds walking around, and you show your football team. We may not have football teams anymore. I know I read something just recently about one of the schools that still pays its football coach $4 million a year and is laying off junior faculty, right? And the junior faculty said, yeah, but we don't even know if there's going to even be a football season, right? So what is it that lures people to campuses? I mean, I don't mean to be glib, but you know, in the age of the coronavirus, showing your janitorial staff, you know, cleaning is significant to show that we take this very seriously. Look, in New York City, you know, Mayor de Blasio is putting on a big show of, let us show you how we clean the subways. Let us show you how clean it's going to be, because we take this very seriously. We know you're worried. So I'm wondering, you know, in the age of coronavirus, how do you make your pitch? This is, you know, May 1st is the big date. School students make their early decisions. All of you are at ranked universities. You're all competing for the best students. We've only been talking right now about the students that you service now. I'm wondering what you've been doing about the students that you've already accepted for admission in early admission in November. And in November, they could not have been more excited about college in the fall. And now all of a sudden, shock to the system, they don't know what to do. Are you in touch with them? Are they in touch with you? How do you pitch them about, don't worry, you'll be safe in our hands?
I mean, so I think there are two things. You know, one is you'll be safe in our hands. And so kind of talking, and this is something that we're evolving, but you know, what does the campus look like and how you'll be safe there, right? But then the other is, you know, the outreach is just so important. So we have, our Dean of Admissions has a video that he sends out to admitted students every Monday morning, just to be in touch. We have faculty members that he's lined up that actually, I mean, this is something that we've never done before, but you get somebody who's talking about criminal justice, or you get somebody who's talking about corporate law, and the students get a sense of what it's like in the classroom.
Make it more exciting.
You make it more exciting. I had a great session with our admitted students last Friday. You know, I have an amazing associate dean for curriculum who, as it happens, is a computer scientist. So I have to say, that's a proof of God's existence. The person who's shaping our curriculum is a computer scientist. So he talked about what he's doing in technology and the way the classrooms are functioning. And then we had our amazing associate dean of experiential learning talked about how the clinics are going on, even in the midst of the pandemic. So the students got, you know, the three of us and the immediacy. And, you know, I think that was incredibly powerful. So we'll find out. But I've actually, you know, been getting a lot of emails where students are saying, that's fantastic, I'm in, right? So, I mean, some of them will defer. That's something that I think we're all kind of working through. But there's ways to make them realize that even in this environment, this is the place that they want to be, even if it's virtually.
Deferring admissions, by the way, have universities, I don't know the answer to this, did they ever have a cap on how many they would allow students to defer? And I assume if there was such a cap, that cap would be rejected this time? I mean, would you have, do you normally have a cap on deferral? Because you can imagine some students, I love what Bill said, that you're actually selling this Georgetown law even better than before in different ways. But is there a limit? Are you going to say to the students, look, we're only going to let 50 of you do this?
I mean, we have, our rule has always been that anybody who wants to defer can defer. And we're going on the assumption that we're going to continue to do that. But, you know, to put it in context, so we're a big school. Our entering class is 570. In a typical year, we'll have 40 deferrals. You know, we're thinking that we'll have 80. But, you know, again, we don't know. So
you wouldn't then admit 40 others who didn't get admitted.
Yeah. So, I mean, so we have the depth. I mean, we get 10,000 applicants.
Right.
So if we wind up taking 60 more students, they're still great.
And you're saying you might do that?
I mean, I think, I think we probably will, because I think there will be deferrals in a way that we haven't seen before. Though I think it's also different. I mean, the college and the business school and the law school are different. I'm interested in kind of, the college experience and how that's shaped. If I can understand high school seniors saying, I'm going to defer a year because I want the classic college experience, right? Whereas law students, I think, they do want the classic first year experience, but they also think, I don't want to delay the launch of my career for a year. So it's it's a more complicated balance.
Patty, do you think that's true? What Bill made the distinction between an undergraduate who's saying, you know what, I would have taken a gap year anyway. Now I have a real reason to take a gap year.
Well, the problem is there's no place to go on the gap year. So a lot of times they took a gap year because they wanted to go do community service someplace, or they wanted to travel, and that's kind of off the table. So I think that there's a little de-emphasis maybe on the gap year and more thinking about doing that later on. And this is a better opportunity to continue with the education and the path that you had for yourself. I liked Bill's examples of what they're doing and staying in touch with the students. In fact, this week, every single one of our almost 30 schools in New York that make up Touro College had virtual open houses. A lot of our schools had accepted students programs online. We've started to do for some of our programs that have different start points. We've already done some virtual orientations, which most schools are now thinking about for the fall and how to make that happen. And so, everything is, you learn something new every day. It's a work in progress. And, it really has been a wonderful challenge. If you can look at any kind of silver lining in the disruption, it's gotten us to figure out how to get to yes in order to be able to have that educational continuity, opportunity, and experience for our students, because on the flip side, it's our business model too.
Debora, I didn't go to business school, but I understand that at business schools, often you have like sort of a project that you're working on that I don't know if you started from the first year and then in the end, you're graded on it. I'm wondering whether many of the business projects might have some COVID-19 related dimension to them, because people are, look, companies have gone out of business. There have been layoffs of workers. I'm wondering whether geniuses in the business school at Harvard might actually be thinking this is their way, this is their vaccine, right? Their opportunity to actually help to say, look, let me think of, my business capacity skills as an economist or as an accountant to actually come up with new models in a project through the Harvard Business School that it actually help employees keep their employers to keep their employees, or what to do, how to better invest a 401k plan, because everyone is completely confused. Nobody knows what to do about any of these things, and everyone's concerned they're not coming back. And so how do you create reassurances that the world will heal itself and things will come back? I'm wondering whether this is something we might see come out of Harvard Business School.
Yeah, no, we're already seeing an awful lot of that energy just bursting forth. We have a couple of students already who set up supply chain replacements, bringing in PPE from China.
Wow.
And elsewhere at Harvard, a lot of folks working with the governor in terms of setting up contact tracing. So the surge of energy has been amazing. And I'm sure as we get out of this sort of initial crisis period, we're just going to see way more of that over the summer and into the fall.
Because, it does have a kind of, post, Pearl Harbor feel,
yeah.
Right? Everyone has ramped up, in New York. I don't know about others, I missed it today because I was introducing the three of you. But, normally I'm open my windows and I'm cheering for healthcare workers. I mean, that's very much part of the New York experience.
Yeah, I already have one of my students who's from New York, is from a community that's been very badly hurt. So he's been organizing what he was calling a sort of a task rabbit for free, where the younger people in the neighborhood are bringing medications and food to the older people. And that's, that's just within his community. But, this is, you see the badness of people at these moments, but hopefully, you see the goodness more.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, people have a sense of, people with MBAs don't care about other people. It's like, well, might not necessarily true. Here's an example where MBAs actually could be deployed in the service.
And they want to be, this is a huge moment for their generation. And, I've been really struck by how many people want to just, roll up their sleeves, even to the point of saying, let me put my education aside, because I just want to go out there and help and figure out what to do. So that's, that is again, to use Patty's term, the sort of silver lining of this mess we're all in.
Bill, I wonder whether that might be true with pro bono work for students.
I have to say, it's extraordinary. I mean, we have a whole series of pro bono efforts that the students, because this is the moment for their generation, right? This is the moment of crisis. This is the moment of tragedy. And they want to use their legal skills to make a difference. So, we're seeing a lot of students, I talked about it before, where they're working to get people out of prison with, their misdemeanors, they're in jail and they're at risk, and the students are working to get them out. Or,
And this is because of the crowding, right? You're saying
because
it becomes a health crisis.
Right.
If you're there with a misdemeanor, you should not be there to get COVID-19 if that's why you're there, right?
Right. You're there because you did something, you're in jail for a month. It shouldn't be a death sentence. Right. And, the people who are in abusive relationships and they're trapped in a small apartment with their abuser, the students are helping people in that situation. So, we actually had a great program a week ago where students who are doing pro bono activities talked about the range of, others are helping, immigrants. So they're doing distance, for people in Dilley, Texas. So, the one thing that I think is very inspiring is seeing the way in which people are rallying around. And again, I think that's a great point. You're seeing the best of people, the worst, but you're seeing the best.
Patty, you were about to say something.
That's another thing that's drawing young people to higher education, because they see the students doing the swabbing for the county health departments. They see the medical students that have graduated early to get into the front lines. They see the law students doing the pro bono. They see the pharmacy students also doing swabbing and doing more community education. Throughout the system of all the various healthcare programs, our mental health counseling students are working with the state hotline in New York. So it's just been phenomenal opportunities where one door closed on some of the traditional kinds of clinical experiences. Now they're finding other things to do. And that's also something that we're telling potential students, that if you come here, these are the kinds of things that you can do as well.
All right, one last topic before I say goodnight. Shervin, show us this last photo. So this is from a high school, I'm not sure exactly where, but this is how they're celebrating graduation. I've seen other such displays. The driveways leading up to high schools have the photos separated, I guess by 6 feet or more, of the graduating seniors. Look, everybody knows graduation is special. That's when your parents finally showed up, right? It's your cap and gown moment. It's the last time you see your friends that you went to school with. We can't minimize, right, the symbolic, emotional significance. We all remember our own graduations. And in all of your cases, Deborah, when you were at Barnard, I remember when Bill was at Fordham, Bill was a hands-on dean, he would get a little weepy, because his students were there and now they're off into the world. And it was meaningful, not just for the students, it's also for the deans and for the presidents to say goodbye. We will see you now as alumni. I'm wondering whether the three of you could speak to that experience of not having a formal graduation, your own sense of loss, and what you think you can do in some way to address that for the students.
Yeah, this is what I'll say. All my years in higher ed, I still get sort of teary-eyed at graduation. And at Barnard, I shook hands and hugged 620 young women every year, and it got to me every year. So it's just sad. Bill, I have a daughter-in-law to be who's supposed to be graduating from Fordham in
Mm.
2 weeks. And, she isn't. So I know at least where I hang out now, we'll make it up to them next year. But that ritual is important. I think we all should sit at our desks and play pomp and circumstance together as a nation, and honor these kids, because it's just a sad moment.
No, I mean, that's absolutely, I mean, it is a sad moment. It's a moment of loss. Again, I've been dean for a very long time, and I always feel the emotion of seeing people come across the stage, and how much this means to them, how much they've sacrificed. You look out, you see the families, the pride, that they've made this moment possible. And I actually personally feel this on another level, because my daughter is a college senior. And so we were going to be, in a month, we were going to be watching her march across that stage, and she's taking her classes now online. So, I mean, I think, I think all of us are trying to figure out now some way to mark the moment. So, what can we do virtually? So, at Georgetown, we're going to have, every faculty member is going to tape a very short congratulatory message, and then we're going to have them all on a screen. And, but that's not what they came for. So we're also planning about a real graduation, a physical graduation, sometimes when we're past all this, because they are extraordinary and they should be celebrated.
Patty? Patty? I think we lost Patty.
No, she's muted.
Patty's muted for some reason.
No, I got unmuted.
Oh.
So Bill, like you, I have a 3L who's supposed to, will be graduating at the end of the month. And I've waited all these years to be able to put that hood on my daughter, and not going to be able to do that now. But like Georgetown, Touro is doing virtual commencements. We have planning committees. We had a town hall with students. Each school is putting their own special touches on it. The students' names will be called, their names will be scrolled, there'll be information about the students. I mean, again, if I can always look at the silver lining, because it's not the best of situations. You used to have to get tickets to go, and every family member and friend couldn't go to your graduation because we were limited by the venues. Well, now anybody can log in. And then, at some point in the fall or in the spring when it's safe, we'll figure out other ways to celebrate the accomplishments of the class. But we're mailing everybody their caps and gowns. Everybody's going to get the printed program. They'll still have their mementos of their graduation. Some of our schools are mailing lawn signs to the students. So it'll say that they're a Touro member of the class of 2020. Some of them may have their names on them. I mean, we're trying to do things. And so, sometimes I think people say, oh, you must be saving a lot of money because the students aren't there in person. And I think it's the opposite. Technology upgrades have cost us a lot of money. Remote proctoring of exams have cost us a lot of money. Even though people may say there could be cost savings from some of the commencement expenses, they're coming in other ways. In terms of mailing things to students and doing things differently to let them know that we're thinking about them.
All right, Bill, did you have something? Before we say goodnight, I just want to give each of you, if you wish, an opportunity. If you were speaking to an incoming student who's on the fence, worried, nervous, not sure about the fall, not sure how they can plan, not sure whether anything they're told they can rely on, given the change every day in information and news. Can you give us some reassuring words that you would give? I'm sure that you've already been in this position, but there's no doubt some students are going to be watching this, whether they're coming to your school and another school, to say, look, don't be afraid of leaving home and coming to college and graduate school, because this is an important time of your life and you don't want to miss it.
I'd say that was beautiful. Yeah, I mean, this is, I think the two things that I would say that are most prominent in my mind is, this is a difficult time, and we are there for you. and we understand the pain that you're experiencing because we're experiencing it too. And this is going to be, even at a time of challenge, an extraordinary experience that you will cherish. We will be working to keep you safe, and we will be ensuring that whatever the fall looks like, it will be a Georgetown experience, a distinctively Georgetown experience, and an experience to treasure.
Anyone else? All right.
I would give some version of what I said to my then high school age son when we were going through 2008, which is, this is a learning moment. It's a crisis moment, but that's when you learn. That's when your personality and your character are forged. And being in a place that's about learning will only enable you to actually process this incredible change that we're going through.
Patty, last words from our Touro Provost?
You know, again, I think that it's a journey, and that's how higher education and that's what their experience is going to be, whether it starts online, whether it starts in the classroom, or whether it starts hybrid. There's going to be learning, there's going to be socialization, and people are going to be able to help move society forward through their experiences and through the service that they provide. That's all part of this great journey in higher education.
Great. Wait, say that again. Sorry, I cut you off.
And we're going to be there.
Before we say goodnight, let me just conclude by saying make sure that you're on FOLCS.org if you're not already on our website signed up for upcoming events. It's FOLCS.org. We've got 2 book events coming up, conversations with 2 authors. The books have come out, and this is because their book tours have been canceled. We're here to help them with their book tours. Bob Kalker is one, and Ben Sheehan. You're seeing Robert Kalker there, The Hidden Valley Road. We also have this really great new series we're starting. It's called the Virtual Film Club. It's the conversations on essential cinema. The first one is May 14th. If you've ever wanted to go to film school and watch essential films, the classic films, you'll be able to watch them. We'll send you the links to the films. The first one is May 14th. Sidney Lumet's The Pawnbroker, and we'll be in conversations with the great Annette Insdorf, who's the head of undergraduate film at Columbia University. But if you've never seen The Bicycle Thief or The Great Dictator or The 400 Blows or Grand Illusion or Path of Glory, you're going to watch it with folks. It'll be an opportunity to together on Zoom talk about essential films. And lastly, we're having our call for entries for our 2020 International Short Film Competition. It's one of our most fun things that we do. We screen movies from around the world of new films, short films, 20 minutes or under in any genre, documentary, animation, humor, dramatic narrative, and it's one of the most, and we punctuate it with Folks Awards Night, where we have a red carpet and we give out the Folksy Award. So if you're a young filmmaker or you're a parent of a filmmaker, we have calls for entry now. Before we say goodnight to Bill and Patty and Debora, I want you all to be safe. That's why we're here tonight, not in a live setting, we're in a virtual setting. We're here for this public service, but we really want you to stay safe. So if we're here in any way to keep you home, that's good, because we're concerned about our audience, we're concerned about the world in which we live. We want to thank our healthcare workers, of course, and those people that continue to perform essential services. We really honor your service, and we're very grateful, and you are helping us, keeping us safe. This event was just incredible. It's going to be online. There'll be a link for it. You can look at it. We'll send it around. It'll be on Facebook. It'll be on social media. It'll be on folks.org. So you can, if you're interested in showing it to someone else, you can get the link. I want to thank Patty and Debora and Bill. This was fun, enormously interesting, and you're really wonderful friends and first-rate educators. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Thane.
Thank you, Thane.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, folks, fans.